the sense that it's trying to affect change, is that Maxwell also has a lot of projects that are doing that work, that are on the ground doing the work that that the message of the work is also in line with. So yeah, his work is socially oriented, and it's looking for a more compassionate and human-centered world. So yeah, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to kind of run through some slides of his first project, which is Demand Justice, which you all saw on the publicity for it. And as we're going through the images, I'm going to ask him some questions, and hopefully that will kind of shed light on the work. We're also going to have a question and answer. So you can type your questions in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and feel free to ask questions. But yeah, I hope that this work inspires you to also take some of the actions that he is doing. So here we go. Let me share my screen. Let's go. And we'll also watch a short video as well. So I hope everyone can see my screen. And Maxwell put this slideshow together as well. So according to Maxwell, according to your website, it says Demand Justice is an art activism project that consists of a series of public pop-up exhibitions throughout Chicago, and uses art as a vehicle to exercise civil liberties. It includes portrait busts of two very famous civil rights activists, Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. So my first question is just pretty general, which is like, how long do these pop-ups last, and what do they consist of when you have an installation? We're all sort of on COVID lockdown, so can you kind of give us an idea of, if we were there, what that would consist of? What would that look like? And I see they're very large too.
Sure. Yes. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. It's definitely a pleasure to share with you, Jody. So much. Such an amazing superwoman behind the scenes. Just advocating for and supporting work like this is dope, and it's definitely a pleasure to be presenting to you all. So I just wanted to say that. And I did go to college and sort of navigate through the arts. And it was like a very challenging time for me, and it definitely shaped how I perceive and navigate and create my work. So it's an interesting circle, so to speak, to come back and speak and now to reflect. So I'll probably be tying in those things as I speak. So to answer your first question about how do these pop-ups happen, I think it ties into, once again, for me, the academic idea, because very often, even when I was in school, there is this ideal scenario that you can set up. You have your critiques, you have all your professors show up, and you have a platform, and you have a plan, and you're able to speak about it. So I guess I will answer that to say that that's also how this project has been affected, with the real world versus the conceptual. In the conceptual academic sense, it's this pop-up that shows up in this particular way where I install the pieces and people get to experience them. In the real world, you have permits. You have organizations that you're collaborating with. You have their timing. And so those are interesting things that I've gotten to learn. And I guess I would start off by sharing with you in terms of like, how do these pop-ups work? It's definitely something that I've had to learn how to maneuver and work with different organizations, the city, and in order to be able to execute. So a lot of the pop-ups have been very brief, as Jody said. People get to see them when they see them, and I think that a little bit has this particular fun or interesting element to it, where the people that get to see it have this shared moment that doesn't exist, that was not necessarily advertised. When I'm installing the pieces, I'm typically looking at space as well, like contextualizing the pieces, whether it be the backdrop or the geographic location or the time of day. I'm interacting with it in some capacity, even in the image that we're seeing right now. This is the literal sunrise. I want to say, the Instagram no filters type hashtag. And it very much part of that installation, capturing that sunrise with all the metaphorical implications in terms of these two figures next to me, and also capturing the individuals running in the background, going through their day while I'm doing this, no sanctions, and that's another aspect. Again, no permits or anything like that. So this vigilante-ish type of exhibition. So the other installations have also involved some collaborative efforts, some of them with musicians or organizations that are seeking justice in their own right. And I've used the pieces as ways to amplify their voices. And then other times the pieces just stand there to sort of impose and exude their message. So I think that's a easy, quick way to kind of run through what these may have been like or are like.
So you're saying sometimes you have to get a permit, and sometimes it's like a brief pop-up that, like you said, like a vigilante, almost like a street art kind of take on things. Is that
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Actually, I've never gotten a permit.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
yeah, the way around. I've never gotten a permit, and that has led to fun times. And you know, so like I said, that's part of like I said, the difference between sort of sometimes the institutional, like as a student, you can just do what you need to do, but then in the real world, there's those things. And actually, right now, I'm waiting on my very first permit.
Mm,
Um, that has actually delayed my installation so far by a week and a half, and that permit is still pending.
mhm.
So those are once again some of the real world things that I've had to navigate through as part of doing this particular installation series.
Mhm, mhm. Cool. And aesthetically, I also, just the way that, it looks like a drawing, the demand justice. It looks almost like it could be like graffitied in a way, the way that the line is. So that's really interesting. I actually did not know that about your work. Um, I'm sure there's a lot I don't know about your work. That's why we're here to learn. I wanted to touch a little bit more on this multidisciplinary approach. On your website, it looks like sometimes you're incorporating maybe DJs, musicians. Um, let's look through a little bit more images. So um, the different colored lights, the sunrise. Um, you
So,
know, here it looks like you're involved in some protests. I wondered if you could speak a little bit more about that aspect.
okay, yeah, sure. Um, so as you sort of mentioned, for me, it's always been incredibly important to I sort of the mantra or the idea is navigating beyond the gallery's walls or the institution's walls. So
Hmm.
that's always the idea for me. So even the art piece itself, like it's literally outside of the gallery's walls, and that was what I was and have been trying to achieve in the work. And it's this. So what you're seeing here are my is the process and my attempts and the ways in work demand justice pushes beyond the barriers of the gallery wall, the institutional wall, the museum wall, in order to be a part of something real. I had always so a lot of my work comes from a disdain or like I guess a pain, so to speak.
Hmm.
But I always just had a strong dislike for the idea of people sipping wine, looking at a photo of a starving kid whose belly is swelled, on the verge of death. That was the type of art that I was exposed to, or the idea of how to approach art that I was exposed to. And I wanted to try to do something that was very different from that. So these photos show the different collaborations that I've worked with. Once again, these are uh, real demonstrations, real organizations working for real issues that are really needing to be changed, instead of just being the reflection of. And Demand Justice has not only been the visual for it, but has also been behind the scenes, being part of organizing and just making sure that their message is heard and amplified. So this type of work was definitely in response to my quest to try to create something that was far beyond this whitewashed idea of what art could be. And for me, it always connected to a privilege that I did not have. Whenever my fellow students were creating work that lacked, or for me, did not equate to something that was affecting real life, a piece of paper on the wall with some weird phrase, and this whole moment, I really, for me, it was sort of like a smack in the face to what I had to do to be in that school, and what my family had to go through to have me be an artist. Me being an artist is a huge sacrifice to my family, and I was completely going against just the sheer opportunity to be in college. So that put a big responsibility on me when I started to create art. If I'm going to create art, if I'm going to do this, I have to create art that really not only allows me to elevate myself, but also elevate others. So that's where you kind of see how I may have, navigated, into that sort of demonstration and organization related to demand justice.
Mhm. So you feel like there was this pressure or this tension between this art for art's sake, or art that was purely aesthetic, or art that maybe wasn't purely aesthetic but ultimately was for just looking at. You always sort of, would you say it was like like you felt compelled, or a duty? Um, like, did you ever feel pressure to kind of do this art for art's sake kind of idea? Because just in broader society, within the last 4 years, you hear of a lot of people in the entertainment industry speaking out, and they're like, oh, just do comedy, or like that theme where people just want whoever it is, especially some sort of entertainer or some sort of artist, to just quote stay in their lane, right? Or I don't know. That does that did you ever feel like that was a message that you were getting?
I'll take it a step further, and
Mhm.
say what I could not articulate at the time when I was in school. I sort of later learned what I was trying to get at, through some of my thought process. I can sort of understand now that there was this relationship and verbiage that was used, something like high art and low art,
Mhm.
right? For the types of language that were used. And high art, now my understanding and also sort of interpretations, high art was white
Mhm.
and low art was black.
Mhm.
And low art was bad, high art was good.
Right, and then there's the economic.
Pardon?
Then
Oh
there's
yeah,
like the economic,
low art does not equate to any substance of value. High art does. And that was something that was was embedded into my actual learning that this individual that did this quote unquote conceptual piece is created this high art that has high value. And for me, and I could say the community and the people that I come from, this high art was never exposed. And subsequently, everything that we created was considered low art. The main example for me was graffiti. Graffiti, that street art, was considered low art and had no value. But it took a sort of high art AK, approach to where we can see graffiti in galleries, but it never had value when it was being done in the Black community or in the urban areas. That didn't have that particular value. So that's the type of message that resonated very strongly with me, where I felt that my way of expressing, I was less than.
Hmm.
I was being told that your way of expressing, you're not as good as us. If you don't speak and articulate and create in the way we see it, you're not as good as us. So I was always fighting against that because one thing it's in my bio that I don't expect anyone to ever get, but it hints to this. I started creating my work on t-shirts. So t-shirts were the basis. I started to create art, but I was told that that's low art. That has no value, but I loved it. I thought it was amazing. So that was sort of the navigation that I was sort of trying to work against. And I just started to translate that through my work. So I think to sort of answer your question a little bit, I was always pushing back against the different standards or expectations for what art is.
Hmm.
And by default, the type of work that I was creating um, in, I guess, in other more strong language was sort of like the bastardized version of art. And not to mention, to add insult to injury, I came from a digital space. So even knowing from the arts perspective, like how long photography was the bastard of art and everything like that, the digital component didn't have that. So me being that creator made me feel like I had to sort of had an uphill battle, and I had a different sort of take that I needed to make sure that I approached. So that was why some of the work also did what it did.
Hmm. Hmm. Oh, that's so interesting. And you're still, when we talk about the Never Forget Chicago, you still have your hand in the T-shirt
Absolutely.
aspect as well. So, um, all right. My next question is, why did you choose the images of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X? Like, what do they signify to you? And we talked a little bit before this about it's almost, it's not exactly half of their face, but it is more than half of one side and more than half of another. And then you have the demand justice in the center, and it's almost like you could put them together, but they're also separate. um, and I was just wondering if their image held a specific sentiment to you. And then also we have like demand with the Malcolm X and justice with Dr. Martin Luther King. So I wondered if that was intentional as well.
For sure. Yeah, it was very intentional. Also, the color palette also was intentional with the red,
Mm-hmm.
being Malcolm X and the green being Dr. King. And also those colors referencing the Ethiopian flag. Uh, saw Marcus Garvey inspired and the Pan African movement and what some now think is a Black Lives Matter flag. So those are the colors that I was inspired by. And yes, it was this whole idea of this coming together and sort of creating this sort of dual consciousness, so to speak, and with the demand and justice, and also this pairing of these two individuals that are often not linked together in many sentences, but are, from my experience in the Black community, it's quite easy to navigate between a Malcolm X and a Martin Luther King conversation and embed them. But I think that outside of that community, they seem like very foreign, conversations and concepts. So I think that in many respects, I was putting that output out there, with these being very public pieces that are for the public. I was also trying to make particular segues into conversation. For example, those colors. Those are just hints and opportunities for the general public to maybe generate a little bit of insight into the Black experience. And me using Malcolm X and Martin Luther King once again, sort of as for lack of a better word, like a decoy, as opportunities for the public to navigate further into the Black experience, the idea of demanding justice. And as you showed in the other slides where, like I said, I use the word decoy because they actually are connected to the real tangible work as well. So these visual faces are not just, there as to look pretty. In the background, they're part of real inspiration and real tangible work as well.
That's really interesting. And you mentioned Black Lives Matter. When did you first create Demand Justice? How long? How old are these? Is this piece?
The pieces I think are maybe like close to 2 years old.
Okay. Because I was going to say, it seems like, especially since 2020, people probably see this and do associate it with Black Lives Matter. And, it just seems like their images keep evolving, depending on kind of what's going on in society, right? So I just wondered if you felt like that was true or not. I feel like when people maybe saw the publicity, that was like the association, like BLM, right?
Yeah, and I think that there is this thing where maybe from outside of my cultural reference point, a lot of things are brand new to people.
Mm-hmm.
And even the idea of demanding justice, it has, even when I first put it up, people thought it was in relation to, I think it was sort of during the echoes of the very beginnings of Laquan-ish echoes and Trayvon echoes. And then later on, obviously, like you said, it's been connected to like a Black Lives Matter and, being connected to police. I think that what that says is that there isn't a clear understanding of the continuum
Mm-hmm.
of sort of the quote unquote demand justice, as it starts from the Malcolm X, Martin Luther King in this particular dynamic, but obviously extends before and goes past myself and today. But I think that there's this idea of America or people outside of my cultural reference to segment and pretend as if there are these isolated instances of injustice or inequality, but there's a continuum that's been very consistent. And that's why another reason why it was very important for me not to modernize the conversation.
Yeah.
These could have been installed in 1980 or in 1970 or 2001. I wouldn't change a thing about them at all if they were being installed in those timeframes. And if I need to install them in 2030, I would not change a thing. And I think that it's important when we look at sort of what these pieces are talking about to understand that there is that continuum and there is a need to address it within the continuum state instead of reactive to isolated instances. And I think that that's where we get often misassociate and misalign solutions because they're isolating the Black experience or the Black struggle to isolated instances, as if they haven't been part of a continuum in a larger conversation. So I think that's what I was aiming for and try to get this timelessness that reflects the totality. And I think that I'm very honored to actually have someone look at the piece and say, hey, this pinpoints today. And then, hey, this pinpoints, Trayvon. I think that for me, lets me know that I sort of did one of the points that I was trying to do. But I do think it's very important for people that look at from outside of the culture or even within, that they understand that, the Black experience is not isolated, from George to Trayvon. It goes far beyond that and
Emmett
continues.
Till. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was reading that Martin Luther King was actually, in the last 3 years of his life, that's when he was most active. And he was even in Chicago doing the Poor People's Campaign, and, you know, uh, while a lot of people have never read any of his sermons or speeches, they might know a quote that they saw online. But he really did see things in such a global way. Like his Poor People's Campaign was, he was critical of capitalism, his criticism of the Vietnam War, and his views were meant for, he was seeing things in a much more global visionary way. Um, Yet he was also working in Chicago on the Poor People's Campaign. So my last question that I would like to ask you is, your work is also very local, but do you see it in terms of like making broader change by focusing on the local? Or I know you also travel with this, so I kind of wanted to hear about your ideas about that, since you sort of started to go in that direction.
In terms of how does it correlate to, how
Yeah,
is it,
like, do you
and how
like
does it,
your work? Hmm.
yeah.
Like, do you think it can have a broader impact?
Gotcha. Yeah, and I think that goes to the sort of the comment that I mentioned, where that these pieces are decoys, and I very intentionally selected very public individuals that can be easily recognizable, but the the struggle and their ideas are ones that transcend once again, and I think that they do transcend culturally. I've seen the phrasing "demand justice" in so many references far outside of even my own. I was watching Game of Thrones, and one of the scenes were like, "Some demand justice," and I was like, "Whoa!" So it's like this is the verbiage is speaks to the extent of the human existence, where it's being pulled to its limit, and where there is a rift, and where it needs to sort of go back to rectifying a sense of tranquility. So I do believe that the piece is very much, and that to I think something that we didn't even tap into, but it to the humanness of it. I do
Mm,
think human. A human, just a general human quality to what my work is about. And what's interesting for me and my perspective is that the Black experience allows people to connect to struggle. And I think that's where a lot of people that sympathize with different experiences that the Black people, even around the world, are. But I do think that significantly, Black people, particularly in the Americas, have allowed a broader range of people to really connect to humanism, to really connect to struggle, to really connect to pain, to really connect to loss, to defeat, to subjugation, to torture. And it is our sacrifice that has allowed us to know what we've done wrong. And similarly to like the Jewish community with the Holocaust, how that sort of is that signifier to the world of an instance that we failed, the instance that we strayed away from what humanism, what a human can be. And in that sense, to go back to your point, I do believe that it has a connection point far beyond myself, my culture, and locally in Chicago, I do believe it's a humanistic idea that we should always strive for. We should always consistently be fighting for, and it should never be something that's scary. I mean, and that's something that we didn't even touch on. It's like the idea that demand justice is scary. For me,
Mm.
is scary. I think that it should be an idea that should constantly be part of our day to day, constantly looking at ways in which you can defend others and yourself against inequality.
Hmm. Yeah, and fear is a weapon, you know,
So,
and it's definitely a detrimental one in our society. Um, Good. Well, I do have more questions about demand justice, but because of time, I do want to, I want us definitely to get to never forget. So let's shift over there and maybe I can ask my last question about demand justice when we get back. So never forget is another project. And like I mentioned, this is the one that sort of brought us into contact with one another. Um, and let's see, this one. So, can you tell us what we see here, and that'll give us an introduction to what Never Forget is, and maybe how you um, started. You know, why you started, how you got the idea, and so on.
for sure. Actually, for whatever reason, this just clicked to me
Mhm.
that most people at this point, and yourself, I just realized I never told you, but Never Forget Chicago also comes from an art piece.
Mm.
And there's an art piece that all the work is actually referencing. So that, but that's not what is public for people. It's sort of, I navigated once again in that same instance, art piece here. All right, how do I articulate and get to what I'm trying to speak about? And Never Forget Chicago was connected to an art piece about child soldiers. So when we go into it, that's where you get the iconology of the Terrence, the teddy bear, representing lost innocence. So this project has been about working to in, ensure that lives have a place, have a quote unquote heaven that's accessible, a sanctuary, and it's connected to the violence in Chicago and the numerous lives that are lost. I wanted to sort of freeze time, so to speak, and get away from the parade of statistics and numbers and the shooting count and start to focus on who are these families, who are these individuals, what are their names, and give the families and the community a place to reference and connect with, to know that that loss is significant, and the community does understand, and we must be aware of that. So that is sort of maybe conceptually the idea behind it. It started as a for me like a response to what I saw in the media and in the community. I would When I started working on the project, I would go to the community where the individual was killed, like the exact community where it made headlines. One particular individual, and no one in the community would remember the individual. I mean, I would go to I went to the church where the individual's funeral was, and like I said, it was headline news. It's even on the currently still on the website of the NAACP. It's one of the most popular homicides that ever happened, and that was sort of when I realized that there is a problem here, and how can we expect to change when we can't even remember what we did? And it's sort of the idea of we repeating history because we don't even remember the history. So that's sort of the objective of it. And I'll
Yeah,
let
it's
you.
like a headline happens and then it's just wiped. But this is a human life that was lost, and certainly felt so deeply among the family. But um, in terms of remembrance and memorializing, we don't really see that outside of your work, I would even say. Um, so I did want to ask you this, since we kind of touched on this idea of fear, was it and humanizing? I certainly see the way that, the victims are humanized. We see their image here. Let's see, here, here, and within the shirts, and hats and so on and so forth. Do you feel like the families also needed, to kind of be humanized? Because sometimes I feel like, specifically gun violence in Chicago, which is like famous around the United States. Anytime people hear Chicago, that's the first thing that they say to you. If they don't know anything else about Chicago, they know that. But I just feel like, you know, a lot of times when it comes to gun violence, people's reaction is just like, oh, well, they must have just been around people, or, it's almost like they're kind of saying that they not kind of like they deserved it, or they were doing something wrong by, and maybe it's just a way of like emotionally distancing from what happened and feeling like it can't happen to you, or whatever. But um it just makes me so sad for the family that
Right.
people would have that reaction instead of like just compassion and empathy. So I wonder if that was something that you were perceiving.
Yeah, so um, I would say that for that, I think that was like a subconscious process. That was something that I was already connected to, but I was unaware to the extent by which the general public was not connected to that idea.
Mm.
So by default, in the process of me working, I was addressing and working with that particular idea that you're talking about. And it's something that I've continuously worked towards, and I've seen the ways in which, yes, the victims are positioned in a way where pretty much they deserved it, and the families are positioned in a way where you should have done better, And I think that that's not a valid way to deal with the amount of pain that's embedded, not even before we address like the the systematic issue affecting Chicago, where one of the biggest havens for the KKK, when the Black community migrated here and forced them into ghettos, and that whole cycle that never shifted. It keeps us away from having that conversation. I strongly believe that the issues that we see in the city of Chicago are limited by the ways in which we're able to have the conversation. And I think that we're not able to have a conversation that's centered around humans. We're having a conversation about statistics.
Mhm.
And I think that that is something that is very, very damaging. And I would hope that Never Forget Chicago would be part of the humanizing component of a solution driven conversation. So I do believe that, back to that humanism point, there is a dire need for families to feel human, and to feel represented, and for a community at large, an outside community, to connect with. Oh, this is somebody they hurt. Just one point, like for me, something that I had to navigate through is I always thought that the person's always supposed to be crying. Like if your kid got killed, like you should always cry, like you should always be sad.
Mhm.
But I've had to learn that, because, and that's also because of the way the media has presented these victims. Every single time it's some lady screaming and throwing herself on the ground with tears in her face, and it's this chaos. But these families that have met, they're in pain, and they have moments where their days are terrible, but they're regular people. They're people that have to work. After the media goes away, they're not on a real housewives of Chicago gun violence or something like that. They're people that have to continuously go on their day to day. They're people that drive the bus. They're people that answer calls. And I think that it's important for people to connect with that. And that's something that not only did I uncover, but I also, was connecting with.
Hmm. Well, let's, I think now, since we're talking about humanizing, why don't we play the clip that we talked about? And we can see some of the people whose work you have, some people you've done work for. So let's play this.
And on that page,
I hope everyone can see.
Cannot be true. Had a talk with her family, my family.
You hear?
So now I have an Isaiah Jr., who is 11 years old.
Wow.
So I started a Facebook page called Heavenly Angels.
On that page, I honor loved ones who have been killed by gun violence in
Chicago. And that page alone has brought so much joy to families. Just to say, Zerlina, thank you for this. My child has not been forgotten. So that's one thing I've done in the death of my child. Is with that Facebook page, Heavenly Angels, a memorial page. And then just to reach out to the families that I've met over the years at different rallies, at different memorial services, and just being a sister to those families, to the men and the women and the children.
The process of the way that the detectives and all the other agencies worked together sparked a new hope in me that justice is possible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Some of the ladies from a support group that I'm in attended the trial with me.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them said to me, she told me this, and she said, even though I didn't get justice or I don't have justice for my son, God answered my prayer because you are the perfect picture of justice.
Growing, and just having, again, my other children, especially my youngest daughter. She has been everything like I needed because in my life right now, because she is the youngest and she is the most understanding, and she talks to me more because she was an infant at the time, or young, a little bit younger but this time she was older with a brother who recently passed in 2017, and I'm watching her journey, and she's my inspiration.
Prayer, friendship, and people like you, they give me hope every day.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. So those are some of the people. So I just wanted to be clear that your project is ongoing, where unfortunately we have more and more people who are losing family members to gun violence, for example, and you're doing a gifting and at different anniversaries. Can you talk a little bit more about that while I bring it back up?
For sure. I think that that once again connects to that whole humanizing component. And for me, it was just very second nature to sort of participate in this. But I started this gifting. It started as little stickers, and then it was pins, and then it was T-shirts, and then it's evolved to some of the stuff we see are like the tree of remembrance. That was Christmas of last year, where a tree was covered in ornaments and each one had someone's their loved one on there, and then they get an ornament and a card, and they also got a shirt with their loved one on there, and these are part of events that happen a few times a year, picking, maybe 2 to 3 events to do. And then on a monthly basis, there's about 150 individuals that either lost someone that month, or it's their birthday of their loved one. And they're, all these, families, many of them mothers that are in pain and grieving and in trauma, once again, are in a scenario where the community has moved on to the next individual. This is a pain that they continue to deal with. There's some that are 11 years later, and that day still haunts them. And when that day circles back around, for them to receive a message from Never Forget with a graphic, and for them to get a card, the response that we get is just, over the top. So that's the work that, is continuous, and the families, really, really appreciate, just feeling and knowing that, someone does care. Their loved one does matter. Their pain also matters, and it helps them get through their day and through their week or their month. So that's another component of Never Forget Chicago, is this the gifting component. And it's something that I've continuously worked towards and working to refine how that works. The ideal way that works is that, someone that is not a direct victim is able to send a gift, and Never Forget Chicago is able to send that gift on their behalf. And it's, once again, the type of gifts that they've received. And I'd like it to be a way for people around the world who sympathize, or in Chicago in the suburbs that sympathize with the pain of, that we have going on in Chicago, to be able to connect with the family. And I think that it goes to sometimes a conversation I have with someone where it looks so hopeless. It's that, what could I do? I can't, stop all the bullets, but I know from experience just what that small gesture does, how that little bit of showing someone that they are cared and loved, and that individual matters, equates to a snowball effect of, the healing that's needed in the community.
Mm-hmm. And on your website, if people went to neverforgetchi.org, they could see the different victims and families that you have connected with, and then they can also write a message, right? So you can send love, release balloons, leave flowers. Now these are virtual, but the send love would be a message that you would review, of course, for it to be like an appropriate, non-hurtful, harmful message, because you never know, we have trolls out there. But anyone who's attending, you too can kind of be involved in making a little bit more light in the world. And I think, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, they can also hit send a gift, and that will be a physical, and that's.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also the virtual thing as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, I didn't know about that part. That's great. And it just has me thinking. It's like every 4 years, it's like vote, 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 vote. Everyone needs to vote. And through voting, whether it's for president or, local elections, like we do see change, but sometimes that feels really incremental. And, a lot of people, that can be painfully incremental too, right? Like change is not coming fast enough. But I think that what you're doing is kind of the answer to that. Like we can all, create mutual aid societies, and we can all help within our community, even if it's in a small way, as in it's not small to the person who you're offering that gesture to. And I think, even like just, having like an anonymous gift or an anonymous gesture from someone you don't know, I don't know, it can kind of just change your outlook and make you know that there are people out there that care.
Absolutely.
So, well, let's take some question and answers. If anyone has any questions, I'm going to um, I'm gonna ask this first question. So Mark Delancey says, you reference the images of Malcolm X and MLK as a pop-up. When you say pop-up, I think not just of something temporary, but also something ephemeral in terms of its material. But these look large and heavy, even if transparent. What is the material?
Yeah, they are painfully heavy, and they're made of wood. Um, and for me, that connects to the message as well. I've always been one that looks for obviously layers in which to connect to the message, and I very intentionally uh, allow that weight that I carry, that struggle, to be a part of that message, and I feel like it adds to the value of what it is that's being said. The fact that these are pop-ups, but yet are this painful process, and it is connected to something that is, in a sense, quote unquote, painful, but serious. But yeah, so they're made of wood. Each one is I think close to 100 pounds or so.
So you take them apart and then recreate it for each space, or do they like stand in a storage space? Like how's it happening?
It's a whole thing. But so each like Malcolm's by himself, Martin's by himself, they come down, but they don't break up beyond that point, and stored, uh, and then when it's time, I rent a U-Haul, which adds up. But hey, that's part of it. But then I pull up and make the installation, and the installation goes up in like 5 minutes. Within 5 piece goes up, and I'm also in a race for case the 50 pull up. So my thing is I try to get the piece up first, and then if there's any issues, then we can address it once the pieces are up.
Yeah. Well, actually, my question was like, if someone wanted to have feature your work at their, rally or protest or whatnot, like, do they get in contact with you? Are you finding the places? How does that happen?
It's typically just connection through like what the cause is and see makes sense, and moving from there. But yeah, I have been requested. Sometimes I shy away from things that don't necessarily reflect the piece, but but I still want to keep the spirit of what the pop up is. Like it's not going to be at like a rock concert,
right?
Or so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's like a balancing act, and sometimes it makes sense, even though it's it's being requested. It makes sense for the piece not to be there, or it's off to the side, because it doesn't help what's going on, nor does it help the piece. Sometimes the piece works best when it's in a very clear space where it can be appreciated.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? You can either unmute yourself or you can type it in the chat box if you do. Any questions about his work? Let's see. Oh, here we go. Ooh, we got a lot of questions. So we have people saying, with the sunrise or sunset, it's stunning and touches me deeply. What medium? So we got to that one. Are donations needed to help with the project?
So I don't take direct donations, but I sort of function under like a social entrepreneurship type model, and so that's also embedded within like Never Forget Chicago, the whole send a gift, receive a gift. I wanted it to be like this tangible exchange, versus so. But yeah, so I'll Never Forget Chicago, if someone wants to send a gift, they can, and you can increment it to reflect what you're trying to contribute. And then with Demand Justice, I sort of filter that through a sort of like merch type experience, where if someone wants to support, the best way is to cop some merch, and you get to represent as well as help out the project. Beyond that, I would be what I'm sort of working on and more open to are partnerships that make sense, where there's like a, organization or an entity like DePaul or something like that wants to, partner, I'm very open to that particular support.
Mm-hmm. Great. Here's another question. After working for a while without permits, what made you decide to get a permit for your upcoming project? Also, what is that project and where can we go see it?
Oh, okay. So the permit is for demand justice, but it's this. I'm sort of, it's titled A Place to Demand Justice, and it's a Lakeshore Drive. And the difference with that installation, it has a platform and a stage, and it's extended installation. So a lot of people have, been missing and wanting to, figure out where they can see the piece. So it's sort of, for me, what I would love it to be is sort of like an encore-ish thing for Demand Justice. Because as it's stated, they're heavy, and it takes so it's this. So that's what this final permit is for. Like, the piece is up for several weeks. People can see it, and I can pack them up. But that's what that's about.
So this person writes, I think you are the embodiment of the words 2 weeks ago of see the light and be the light. Bravo. My question, have you considered writing books for children? Which is a great question because I already know the answer, but go ahead. I have a 4-year-old grandchild.
Gotcha. Actually, that's I think that's right. If my arm was long enough, I would be able. Maybe my arm will extend. Let me see. But the answer is yes. I do have a few books that I've written, and actually, well,
show us.
Yeah, they center around. There's some that center around. Never Forget Chicago's Teddy Bear Terrence. So there's like a few series with that. And then another one that I'm pretty excited about. This is Nia and the Lion, and she's very cool. And I'm very excited about something I have coming up with that particular book. And we talked about this multidisciplinary thing, and actually been navigating into, and it's always been part of my work, but animation. So actually, that's where I forget so many things. That's where the book started off too. So I started with an animation, and then I just turned them into stories. And then now I did the story for one of the books, and I'm looking into working on animation. So yes, thank you so much for that compliment. But yeah.
So where can they get it? Where can they find your book? Are you on Amazon?
I think by default, Amazon put me on there, but and I think that if someone did get it, they would be able to sneak one. But currently,
independent bookstores.
They're kind of not officially out in a sense, particularly. But because I'm trying to look, I want to be able to reach the people the way I need to. And so right now I just have written the books and they're all done. And I usually give them for free for the most part when I'm like teaching a class or something like that. And, but I think some people may have been able to catch them on Amazon. I don't know. But yeah. But
there's a good bookstore called Women and Children First.
Okay.
That you might. All right, next question. I just wanted to congratulate you, Maxwell, for your beautiful work, as it has no doubt changed many families' lives. I hope that one day we can have something similar to your work here in my hometown in Brazil. Yeah, so this was more of a thank you. Can we participate and volunteer in person once COVID is over, like help out with events and exhibitions and whatnot?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, no, it's so right now. Never Forget. So Never Forget website has over 7,000 individuals on there, and then there's the Never Forget family that is now I think a little over 2,000. So when we're doing stuff, that just gives you an idea of the amount of numbers of gifts that have to be created, and the answer is yes. all hands on deck is always what happens. And I think it would definitely be very beneficial and helpful to be able to get individuals involved in that particular process. And it's definitely a fun thing to do. So yeah.
So would they go to a specific website? How would they contact you? You can type it in the chat if you want. If they're like,
I would use Never Forget Chicago. Never Forget Chicago. I mean, Never Forget Shy. Never Forget Chicago. NeverForgetShy.org has the volunteer, the volunteer tab in there and something to fill out. So that's the best way, because I'd be able to have all the content needed. But NeverForgetShy.org, volunteer tab on the right. And definitely I welcome and would appreciate those as well. There's also some behind the scenes stuff with connecting with families as well. That's also, would be helpful to have some support on. So yes, I definitely welcome that.
And what about the Demand Justice merchandise? Where can they get that? I have someone asking about that.
DemandJusticeChicago.org.
Demand Justice. All right, I wrote that down. And another question about following you on social media. What is your Instagram? Do you remember? I always forget my Instagram name. Or is it?
Yeah, so I mean, we could do, I think a good one would be Demand Justice. So let me, I think I can try to type that one in there. It'll be my first time to do that. I'm on the.
You have all these fans now.
Demand Justice by Emcays. I don't know the phone thing, but it's Demand Justice by Emcays for Instagram, and Never Forget Chicago for Facebook.
So Demand Justice by Emcays that's your Instagram?
Yeah, that is correct. Demand Justice by Emcays Instagram, and then Never Forget Chicago is Facebook, and that'll be the best.
Never Forget Chicago. Okay. All right. Good. Well, we are about up, but if anyone has any last questions, we'd be happy to entertain them. But I just want to thank you, Maxwell. This was really good. I actually learned a lot more about you and your work. So hopefully we can keep this conversation going. And yes, please, everyone who's in attendance, you can buy merchandise. You can get involved in volunteering. But we're just so happy that you have come and learned more about his work. So thank you. Oh, here we go. How would you recommend integrating this kind of hands-on work in the classroom for final projects? Get the students to make art, t-shirts, etc., and share at a community level?
Absolutely. Yeah. I would love to be contagious in that regard. And I think that would be, amazing to do that. So actually, I used to cheat a lot in college, in the sense that if I was in English, Never Forget Chicago actually was started in college. I would work on it and part of it in a Black history or Black subject class. And then I would submit that. And then in art class, I would work on a different component of it. And then in another class, I would work on a different aspect of it. So I did that a lot with a lot of my projects. And I think that would be great if other teachers could adopt that type of way.
Really good idea.
Collaborating, one part art teacher, the literature teacher over here, embedded all throughout. So I always thought that way, and I always did that. All throughout, everything that I wrote or created was, I always had these projects on the side, and I would think that I would really recommend and like to see that happen with kids. Yeah.
So is this program recorded Unfortunately, it's not. Have you ever considered, will you be teaching a class on Blacks and, oh, no, that's me. Would you be available to give a talk to a class?
Yeah.
Is the question.
Yeah, I would.
And I think, have you ever considered adding other powerful voices to the demand justice piece?
Yeah, I've considered it. I definitely have. It's a little bit of a battle because the way I work is I might end up creating a new project for that. But I did, and I have been thinking about that as I am trying to potentially look at the next phase of demand justice, or how I sort of work with that. But I am interested. I think that they might most definitely be two women, but I would want them to have that same energy though. So I don't want to change that at all. So
Maybe an
so
Angela Davis.
who and who?
Angela Davis, I see her in the back. So
Maybe Angela and other potential, but yeah, I'm looking for. I'm considering. I am considering it. I think that would be the next thing that could potentially be. I think two huge women's faces. I think are amazing. A lot of my work has a lot of women in it, so I think that naturally I would do that. So yeah, for sure.
Okay, great. All right. And someone said two women. That's exactly what I was going to ask. Demand justice at Queen's Landing is on display until when? And there will be another exhibit on display or setting somewhere on the lakefront?
That Queen's Landing one is till the 21st. And it's sort of like, as I it's a little bit still pop-up-y, but it's like for a full day until this plays nice. But yeah, so that's the best way. And also on demand justice, there's a sign-up thing for that too. So I will shoot out some notifications when the piece is up. But right now it's been at Queen's Landing is like the focus for where the installations are. But I would subscribe on demandjusticechicago.org and just click the sign up to know when the next installation is going to be.
Okay, great. Last chance. Any more questions? All right. Well, thank you, and we'll talk soon. And if I get any more questions, I'll pass them along to you. But it looks like we're good. So,
all righty.
This was fun.
Everyone out. I appreciate you. You guys have an amazing night.
You too. Bye.